Welcome to Fort Worth 148's podcast, where we meet to discuss Masonic topics and strive to build value in the Brotherhood. The opinions and statements of the participants do not represent any positions or stance of any Grand Lodge or Lodge and are solely the viewpoints of the participants. Welcome back to the podcast, brothers. This is Rhit Moore, past master and current secretary of Fort Worth 148.
This is Billy Hamilton, current junior warden of Fort Worth 148.
And this is Gabriel Jagush, current senior deacon of Fort Worth 148, and we have a special guest today.
This is Paul Underwood. I'm past master of Johnson City Lodge 561, and currently I hold a position of Deputy Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of Texas.
Well, it is certainly an honor to have you on, Right Worshipful. This is kind of a dream come true in a sense, it's starting as small as we have to have someone, with such a great story as you have on the show. So we have been looking forward to this. Absolutely.
It's my honor.
Awesome. Well, Gabe, I don't think we're going to do any listener questions, right? We're just going to jump right into the...
Yes, we're going to dispense with the minutes, so to speak, and get right into the meat of it. Rhit, if you want to get us kicked off, go for it.
Yeah, I think before we get started too deep in the Masonic sense of things, could you tell us a little bit about yourself outside the Masonic lens?
Sure. I was born in Hillsborough, Texas, December 28, 1951. Lived there till I was 10 years old, and then I went to Masonic Home School, which we will talk about that, understand later. I've been married to Rebecca Underwood since May of 1971. I guess the math on that works out to about 48 years.
Oh, wow.
And I have 3 children, all adult children, 2 boys and a girl. We have 12 grandchildren.
Oh.
Throughout my life, ever since Masonic Home and School, I've lived a varied list of places. And the movements that we have moved over the years, in those 48 years, has been driven by career moves. You're chasing a career ladder. And so we've lived everything in Dallas and Fort Worth. We've lived in the Austin area. We've lived in the Hill Country. We've lived in Washington, D.C. We've lived in the San Antonio area. And this is actually the 3rd time we've lived in the Corpus Christi area. And that's where we've lived for the past 10 years. So I'm probably a veteran nomad. Sort of an issue that my son, oldest son, Phil, sort of complains and takes a sense of pride at the same time is, of course, he graduated from high school, but he attended 4 high schools in high school. So that's a testament to how often we moved. So,
No, I can relate.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit about me outside of Masonry.
Awesome.
As far as, I think you'd asked me to say, well, what do we do in our free time? Well, I don't really have any free time. I'm retired from the controller's office of 31 years, but since then I still do some contract work, tax consulting work for the controller's office. I do most of it virtually. Between that and Grand Lodge activities, there is nothing left. But when there is a gap in time or whatever, my wife and I, Rebecca, we like to go on cruises when we can. If we catch a new movie that piques our interest, we'll go see a movie. But probably a personal interest of mine has been, and it sort of fits with where I grew up, but I've had a passion for genealogy research and where I came from and knowing all about filling in those gaps that no one could tell me about. And so I've had a passion for that as well. But I have to set it on the shelf from time to time and get back to it when time permits.
Well, that's kind of funny because kind of leads into the next question. Do you have family history, Masonically speaking, anyways?
Well, I do quite a few, in fact. Of course, obviously my father, Doc Underwood. He was not a doctor. In fact, my father, bless his heart, he died when I was 3 years old. But his nickname was Doc. I used to ask my mother, "What's his real name?" She says, "I don't know. All I ever knew him as is Doc." He was born in 1902. That's before the people were born in hospitals and had birth certificates and stuff. He didn't have a birth certificate until it was what they call these things is you do it after 1914. You had to get a birth certificate to qualify for Social Security. So he didn't really have a birth certificate, but he couldn't read or write. But he made a living. He provided for the family. But that was my father, Doc Underwood, and he was a Mason. I have had two brothers, two who were no longer living. They were Masons, as well as my last surviving brother, David Underwood.
Mm-hmm.
Some of you might have met him. He lives in Garland.
Mm-hmm.
Have a son, Phil Underwood. There's a total of 8 in my Masonic family, if you will. And my son, Phil. I have a brother-in-law, Steve Cumby, who lives in the Eureka area, Springtown, Eureka Lodge area. I have a son-in-law, Justin Cloudis. Justin is a member of Bandera Lodge. And have a nephew, Adam Cumby, who is the son of my brother-in-law, Steve Cumby. He also is a past master of Eureka Lodge. And then I never knew this man, sort of like my father, but my wife, Rebecca's stepfather, Lee Cumby, was also a Mason, and she just thought the world of that man. I have comments to make about some of those people. Is if you're ready for that.
Fire away.
Well, back to my dad. He was born in 2002 and died in 1955 at the age of 52 from a heart attack. And that was the impetus of which later led to me and my brothers going to Masonic Home and School. But although I never did know the man, he left the footprints of masonry that showed me the way by providing for the protection and relief of his family after his death through the, if you will, the benevolence of masonry. In fact, later on, my mother lived her final years at TMRC.
Oh, wow.
The evidence of his devotion to his family and living principles of masonry, it just had a really profound impact on my life. It inspired me to seek out masonry, even though he had passed, and I never have no memories of this man, but the footprints he left behind sort of showed me the way. He was I guess what you call a sharecropper. He would travel between Hill County down by Hillsboro and West Texas near a little town called Emma. He had a landowner that owned property in both places, and he would go back and forth and work the fields of these landowners as a farmer. While he was out in West Texas, he joined Emma Lodge 931. And that's where he became, of course, took his EA Fellowcraft and Masters. I think he took his Masters in 1944.
Oh, wow.
Of course, he did serve in one office out there. He served as Tyler of that lodge in 1947. Then later, I guess, after he sort of lived most of his life, later life in Hillsboro, he moved his lodge membership to Hillsboro 196 in 1950. And that's where he stayed until his death in 1955. He and my mother, Allie Underwood, were both lifelong members of Eastern Star as well. Really to sort of honor our father, On June 11th of 13, my brother and I purchased an endowed membership in Hillsborough Lodge in his name after death.
Oh, nice.
And my two brothers, I like to say the brothers twice, Jim and Frank, they're both no longer living, but they were grown and gone before I was ever born. They had children that were older than me.
So
I'm
you
the
were
youngest.
uncle.
Yeah, I'm an uncle to people that were older than me. But I'm the youngest of 13 kids in my family.
Oh, Lord have mercy.
With both
Yeah,
the
that's a
same
big
parents,
family.
26-year span between the oldest and youngest. Just sort of simple math, every 2 years, they had a new child. So for 26 years, they had kids crawling around on the floor.
God bless your mother.
Well, and somebody asked one time when they were both living, why do you have so many kids? And he says, well, farmers need farm hands. And that was true. I can remember my mother and daughters. In fact, my parents had 3 boys, followed by 7 girls in a row to toward the end, 3 boys. That counts for the 13.
Yeah.
So those 7 girls, I remember seeing some of them going out in bonnets with my mother and going out picking cotton in the fields. But my 2 brothers, after our father died, those 2 brothers, they both were Masons because they drank the Kool-Aid of Masonry from our father.
Mm-hmm.
They spent the rest of the years before us, 3 remaining children went to Masonic Home School. They sent money to my mother to help, make ends meet. Sort of benevolence within the family from a Masonic standpoint.
Yeah.
But my brothers, David and Jerry, had another brother in between David and I. Jerry ended up dying in a car wreck shortly after graduation from Masonic Home School. But we went to Masonic Home School in 1962 as wards of Hillsborough Lodge 196. And unquestionably, my brothers, that was a defining moment of all 3 of our lives. We went from, dire poverty to felt like we'd won the lottery going to Masonic Home School. And our plight wasn't different than most children many children that experienced adverse circumstances. We were not unique in that standpoint, but where we were privileged, if you will, is we had the Masonic safety net to come to our relief. And many people did not have that. And so that was just an incredible opportunity that came our way that had it not been for me, who knows where we would have been. My mother tried to keep us together. She worked 3 jobs. She had like an 8th or 9th grade education, and she just until our father died, she was well tell all his kids she was a homemaker.
Mm-hmm.
But when he died, she had to go to work, and she had 3 jobs, and just sort of left us home alone, if you will.
Yeah.
And that calls for just challenges in growing up. And the Masons at Hillsborough Lodge came to my mother more than once, suggesting that she consider putting us in Masonic Home. And she said, no, I'm going to make this work. And it just kept not getting any better. And so finally, after several attempts, they convinced her to place us there. And so we went to Masonic Home, like I said, in 1962. She had the wisdom and love to do for us what was better for us, even while at the same time it broke her heart.
Yeah, no, that had to be tough.
Yeah. But my son, Phil, is a 3rd generation Mason. in the Underwood line.
Yeah.
And I'm truly proud he stepped up and owns that distinction. He got to do, or he gets to do, what I never got to do, and that's sit in the lodge with his father.
Yeah.
My brother-in-law Steve completes the circle with me and Rebecca and her stepdad Lee Cumbie, who was Steve's stepdad. Steve is a very passionate Mason up there in the Eureka area and a very hard worker in his lodge and in Masonry. And so he's now a member of 3 generations of Masonry in that Cumbie line, along with his son. And both are past masters, Eureka Lodge 371.
Yeah.
My son-in-law, Justin Cloudus, is married to our daughter, Kimberly Underwood. Justin's a good man, and he adopted Kimberly's oldest daughter from a prior marriage, and has been the father she never had. Somewhat like me.
Yeah.
In other words, she sort of grew up without a father. A story about Justin worth mentioning, if you might allow me, is when he and our daughter Kimberly were dating and finally decided to get married. He asked her to marry her, and she said, "Well, I will when you become a Mason."
There's the catch-22.
And Justin says, "What's up with that?" And she said, "Well, if Masonry is good enough for my dad, it's good enough for the man I'm going to marry. So there's your challenge." And he petitioned Bandera Lodge 1123 and became Master Mason. So he became my brother before he became my son-in-law.
Yeah, there's something about it. I mean, and she's right. It'll keep you out of trouble because keeps me off the streets. I was going to ask you, who in particular was most influential to you, and I think really touching that it was your father. Although you don't have any memory of it, he still really impressed those Masonic values on you. That kind of motivated you into the fraternity.
Right.
And you also mentioned your wife, Rebecca Underwood, and I wanted to bring her up because I had a great conversation with her at the Fort Worth conference, and she's everywhere with you, traveling, and such a great lady. But I wanted to ask you her take on that travel. How does she feel about that?
Well, she has some medical challenges, and I don't mean to sound ominous with that, but just as we get older, it gets harder and harder, self included, to our body just sort of doesn't take the bumps on the road as easy as it used to. But she is just tickled pink to go everywhere I go and to be there to share in this miraculous journey we're on. She just people will come up to me and say, "Where's Rebecca?" That she lights up the room when she walks in there, and she is. I like to say when people bring her up, I say, "Well, she's an example of my good judgment, and I'm an example of her compassion." So she has a heart of gold, and we just, like I said, we've been married for 48 years, and anybody that knows her knows the wonderful person she is and how supportive she is of Masonry. She just adores going everywhere she can to not just to support me, but to help further the cause of women in their role in Masonry.
Yeah, and that's something I wanted to ask you about too, because that's something I've seen kind of a trend uptick a little bit of wives and families being included in lodge activities. And I wanted to ask you how having your wife involved in it and your sons as well, how that's enriched your Masonic career.
Oh, wow. Well, when I met her, and of course we're dating. I met her when we were both 18 years old, and someone asked me one time, said, "How did you find such a good fit of a partner in life at that age? You were wise beyond your years." Well, I appreciate you saying that, but I just really got lucky. That, and I feel blessed, but I am lucky that to run across someone that was such a good fit and a good life partner, and she fit the bill on that completely. But she's her. As we got to talking, of course, I couldn't become a Mason when I was 18 years old because back then you had to be 21.
Yeah.
And so I had to wait my time with patience for 3 years. But coming out of Masonic Home and School, I had no doubt in my mind that I wanted to be a part of this organization, which I was a major benefactor of the organization, but I didn't really know anything about it.
Yeah.
I just got all of this wonderful support. And I thought, well, any organization that does something like that, I want to be a part of it. And so, anyway, so we're talking about this for the 3 years as I'm 3 years in the anteroom, if you will.
Yeah.
And waiting to turn in a petition. And we talk about it. And of course, sure enough, in talking with her, I find out that her stepfather was a Mason, and it was a father that her mother married after earlier marriage didn't work out. And this man was such a good man to her and her siblings and her mother that she adopted him as her father and took his name. And he was a member of La Feria Lodge down in South Texas. It's no longer in existence, but down around Donna and McAllen area.
Yeah.
But that connection of Masonry to her preceded me meeting her. So she already was feeling like a man that's this good to me, and he's a Mason. He's and now I find out you're wanting to be a Mason. You grew up in Masonic Home School. It's just sort of predestiny, so to speak. But it's been a blessing.
Yeah, and I find that really interesting because, I joke with a lot of guys at Lodge that, my wife knows more about what's going on up at Lodge as far as, what we're planning and what we're going to do and people's personalities, because I enjoy sharing that with her. And luckily she tolerates me talking about it, but it's really enriched my Masonic career having, my wife supporting that in such a way, if nothing more, just willing to listen to me talk about it.
Right. And be a part of that experience too.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry. This again, as a graduate of Masonic Home and School, we not only had class reunions like most people have every 10 years or so, we have family reunions still to this day of everybody that ever graduated from that home and school that can get there and are still alive. They attend these family reunions, and there'll be sometimes 200 or 300 people at these reunions. And to put that in context, Masonic Home and School, there were about 3,800 children that went through the doors of Masonic Home and School in its history of 105 years. And there's about 900 approximately living today. And, 25 to 30% of those show up at every reunion. Taking my wife there, anybody that didn't grow up in Masonic Home and School was considered a city guy or a city girl.
Yeah.
As opposed to a home guy or home girl. But she went enough times that she became an honorary home girl.
Oh, wow.
And everybody considers her part of the family. She's looks much forward to going and seeing all of her adopted brothers and sisters as I do.
Yeah.
But as far as ladies and lodges, she's we're a member of about 11 lodges around the state. But one that we go to pretty regularly in Corpus Christi is a Sunset Lodge, and
Mhm.
there's just a tremendous activity. Wives and girlfriends that attend that lodge, and I share with you just sort of an example of a flavor of what happens there. Now it might be a total of 30 or 40 people that show up to this little Sunset Lodge in Corpus Christi, but 30% of them, half of them almost, are ladies, wives and girlfriends. I say girlfriends because there's some young men in this lodge that, so like Gabe, that haven't gotten married yet.
Which is a very temporary situation.
Right. But I was standing in line to eat food there before the lodge meeting, and there was this couple who I knew very well, and Sonia and Don Miller, and they were talking, and they were there visiting. And Sonia turned to Don and she said, we've been coming to this lodge enough now that she says, I don't know about you. She says, but I'm joining this lodge. You can come or not come, but I'm coming. I like it here. Because she had fit in with a network of ladies there and was looking forward to going there every time. And that's actually been the magnetism that's caused that lodge to prosper even more, is the involvement and just the camaraderie of the ladies that come to that lodge. And when I've seen that in other lodges around the state, those lodges are really flourishing, and people well attended as well. So it's something that we all ought to look forward to doing more of.
There's no doubt, and we've learned that including the wives from the very get-go of the investigation process, and having them a part of it, really helps sell them on the whole process and get them involved, because it just makes it more fun.
Yeah, I was going to say one of the more fun things that I've ever done on a candidate investigation was, I'm sitting in this guy's living room, and I have a glass of Diet Coke, and I'm talking with his kids, and I'm messing around with the dog, and the person that I'm talking to is his wife, because I'm done asking him the questions that are on the preset sheet and the questions that I came up with in advance. So I asked all my questions, and he asked all the questions he had for me. And then the rest of the conversation, which was like a good 30 minutes more, was just me talking with his wife and answering her questions and asking her questions and just opening up that dialogue of, hey, what is your husband getting into?
Right.
Well, there's no better example of an extreme of how much a wife could sacrifice their time for Masonry, because like my wife, she's at home with the kids, once or twice a week. Paul's wife is traveling all over the state, so you got some real extremes there.
Now that's what we call having backup.
Yeah. They need to be a part of it, because it's not a club you join and move through real quick and you're done. It's a lifelong thing.
Yeah.
So
I think that's one of the most dangerous things that we can tell a guy. Oh, it's only one night a month. Are you kidding?
Yeah, we'll get more out of you than that.
Yeah.
Gabe, you want to get us into the next portion?
Yeah. So, Paul, it's pretty well known that you're a former student of the Masonic Home and School in Fort Worth, kind of as we've already talked about. Can you tell us a little bit about how old you were and what year it was that you became a resident, and kind of a little bit about the background behind you becoming a resident of the Home and School?
Sure. Well, I was 10 years old when I went there, and I remember the date because it's like a wedding date or a birth date or something like that. It's a date of significant importance to me that I burned in my mind to never forget. And it was August the 18th of 1962.
Wow.
And it was a life-changing event. But as far as the circumstances that led to going to home, like I said, I'm the youngest of 13 kids, but when my dad died, I was 3, and my mother struggled to keep us together for almost 7 years. Finally, it just was wearing her out because she was working 3 jobs, and it just wasn't working out. And so we went there, of course, years after my father died. It was pretty traumatic going there because, you have a 10-year-old kid and you take them away from the only place he's ever known. And going up there, the structure was that they had dormitories for the smaller children, and the high school children lived in sort of little apartments within the larger building. It had like 2-bedroom apartments.
Yeah.
But so I went up there and I was separated from other 2 brothers, and part of it was for acclimation purposes. That years later they changed the format there to where you put children together in the same family in these cottages, but they didn't have those cottages when we went there. It was all dormitory style, where I went into a room with like 12, 15 kids and had rows of beds, so like you'd see in the military or whatever, and had lockers, and that's the environment I grew up in, and I was scared, and it took a while to get used to that, because when my mother's circumstances not being around, I was used to just sort of doing my own thing, and now I was put in a rigid, disciplined environment, and it was hard to adjust. But it was a challenge. But as I learned the benefits of what I was being exposed to, and I came around to understanding why. And it helped. It was part of my formative years of becoming the person I was or am.
Yeah.
By the discipline and the structure and the training that I received there.
That's so interesting. So you said you'd mentioned you remember the date and that you were young and that you were scared. Do you remember? I mean, when those doors opened and you finally saw where you were going, were you more scared, or was there relief, or what were you feeling?
Oh, well, and it's sort of, I don't know if it's, at the age of 10, your memory's not always, here now.
Yeah.
I'm 68, I'm trying to remember 58 years ago. You remember what you want to remember and you forget what you want to forget. But, it was, of course, I really didn't remember knowing how I ended up there, other than I just remember going out on a playground with my 2 brothers and playing on the playground. My mother didn't take us there. The Masons of Hillsborough Lodge took us there.
Oh, wow.
And I just sort of felt like we was going on a trip somewhere. And the next
Yeah.
thing I know, we're at this place and I'm playing on the playground. And next thing I know, I look around and these Masons are gone.
Interesting.
The people, the caretakers and stuff, came and took us and brought us to our different dormitories, and it was sort of clunky getting there, but I really didn't like it to begin with, but because
That's
it
typical.
was, but I can't leave the topic without saying that even though it was scary going in, by really within a few months, I was acclimated and just loved it there. And it wasn't like my mother disappeared.
Yeah.
She was able to find, when she didn't have to keep doing 3 jobs at once anymore, she could come up there and see us from time to time. So finally, it's just like she'd come to see us, and we're too busy doing something else, and weren't even there for her to come visit us. So we'd adjusted quite well, and of course, I love my mother dearly for what she did for me. She's the one that made the sacrifice to allow us to go there, and I will be forever grateful to her for having the love for us to do that for us, even though it broke her heart.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if she was approached when you were 3, when your dad first passed away, it took her 7 years to toil with that decision and finally make that. I couldn't imagine having that burden. But what a blessing it was for her to have something like that she could trust.
Yes.
She wasn't worried what was going to happen, but just relinquishing that duty as a mother. Wow. I mean, what a lot of courage. No doubt about it.
I mean, not that it's the same, but there's somewhat of a parallel of someone giving up their child for adoption. I mean, even though she stayed in touch with us, it just was, and I told her before she died that how profoundly grateful I was for her doing that, placing us there. We really did. It was such a gift, and the really the privilege going to Masonic Home and School. It can't be underestimated. It upped our standard of living tenfold.
Yeah.
We were the poverty of Hillsboro, Texas, and we were and going into an environment like that, different kids coming there, but they're all come there with a less than satisfactory environment at home, and you go there, whereas where you came from, you're the bottom of the totem pole socially in your community, but when you go there, you're all peers because everybody comes from similar, less than ideal circumstances, and so you didn't have the peer pressure that you had from where you came from. And that helped as well.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Yeah, because you all had kind of that checkered, hard past, and you didn't have to worry about having holy shoes and the other kid didn't, kind of thing. You were all on the level.
First pair of new shoes I ever owned, I received there, and that was just really special.
That's something.
Wow. In Hillsboro, before we went there, I remember people from time to time in the community would stop and overnight would drop bags on our porch of clothes, just like you'd take to Goodwill. They'd take it to the Underwood house and leave it on the porch.
Oh, wow.
And you'd put some of those clothes on and wear them to school the next day, and people would say, "Hey, Billy, I see you got my shirt on." And it just really didn't make you feel very good at all.
That's interesting. That puts it on a level playing field there at the home and school.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Can you walk us through like a typical week of what you would do at the home and school? I mean,
well, there's sort of two different levels, if I might, Rhett. When I grew up there in the elementary age student, of course, regardless of age, we all, even through high school, it wasn't military, but it was sort of very structured, and you're working with large groups of children. We got up at 6:30 in the morning, showered, and get ready for the day, and you had to stand for inspection, personal hygiene inspection. And if you didn't pass inspection, there were consequences, and consequences were you would either get a paddling or you'd get one of the punishments we had was, and other people never heard of this before. We'd have to go out in the hallway if we'd misbehaved and get down on our knees and face the wall in the hallway and with our hands behind our head and just sit there for, maybe 30 minutes to an hour. That was our punishment. Wow. So you're on your knees. And that was, as an elementary school kid, that was a pretty challenging punishment to take care of. But
that's
but
like
after
an extreme timeout.
Right, but we
Yeah.
marched everywhere we went. You marched everywhere we went, and in elementary school, we'd march to our meals, we'd march to school in double file, and you knew your spot, and you had to be in that spot. If you got out of line, well, you got a paddling for that. It was zero tolerance. It was not, most of us, and as a parent myself, you'd tell your child, when you do that again, I'm going to send you to your room, or I'm going to swat you, or I'm going to, whatever the consequences are. And then they did it anyway. You say, I told you, and it was sort of like escalation of maybe the third time they knew they were going to get the SWAT.
Yeah.
Well, there it was zero tolerance. You knew what the rules were, and it was like bend over.
Oh, goodness.
And you learned that there was no slack in that rope.
Yeah.
So it's just you get what you used to. And, the school there, of course, as a campus, when I was there, and it varied over the course of the history of Masonic Home, but when I was there, the enrollment was probably just short of 200 students.
Oh, yeah.
Thereabouts. And, they, again, as a youngster, they furnished your clean clothes, and you didn't have your clothes. They had sizes that fit everybody, and your house parent would lay out your clothes for you, and that's what you wore. And what I wore this week, well, Rhit might be wearing next week, and so forth. And so they weren't my clothes. They were the clothes that were issued to me at the time. But you had chores you had to do before school. And some people didn't know it, but, Masonic Home and School had a campus, of course, surrounded by a chain link fence. And that chain link fence defined the independent school district that was created by the Masons of Texas back in the 40s.
Mm-hmm.
And that ISD was within that chain link fence. So if you didn't live inside that chain link fence, you didn't go to school there. But with that, we had just incredibly wonderful teachers that they all loved us. They were career teachers there. They didn't stay for a year or two. I still remember all of the school teachers I had from grade school through high school.
Oh, that's a feat. Yeah.
Because they never changed, and they stayed there. They were there when I got there, and they were there when I left. In fact, one of those teachers meant so much to me. In fact, two of them. My high school principal came to my installation in 2000 as master of Johnson City Lodge as the replacement for my mother.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
She set up in the East with me, as well as Rebecca did, of course. And the man that did my installation was my high school football coach from Masonic Home School. He lives there in the Fort Worth area today. His name is Bill Holt. And just a wonderful man that I've known since the early 60s. And was a big impact to my life as well.
So that was actually really, you kind of led into the question. Was I was going to ask, were there any people that you felt made the most impact while you were there? People that are the most memorable to you?
Yes, Murray Glick and Bill Holt come to mind, and as the two people there that, not that there weren't others, but those two people probably had a bigger impact on my life than anyone else during my years there.
What did go ahead, I'm sorry.
Bill Holt was my math teacher as well as my football coach and basketball coach, and he's just still to this day is a incredibly wonderful man. He was there when I was elected Grand Junior Warden.
Oh, wow. That is something else. That had to be a cool moment for him too.
Well, it was. So, yeah. In high school, though, of course, we didn't have any cars, and because for obvious reasons, you're at a place that because you didn't have anything to begin with, and yeah, you have no way of acquiring a car. In fact, as an elementary school, we had no bicycles because can you imagine having 200 kids running around on bicycles? It just was, and who's going to fix them? So there were bicycles were forbidden, cars were forbidden. You walked everywhere you went, kept you in good shape.
Interesting. So like when you hit high school level, and you're 16, 17 years old, you guys would just do everything on campus?
Well, no, we'd get out and walk. We'd hitchhike. Back in the day, it was still, and they didn't condone that, but it's sort of like when you got outside the campus. Well, you stretch the rules, if you will.
Yeah, you did what teenagers do,
right? So we hitchhiked, or I'm not kidding you. One time, me and a couple other guys walked from the Masonic Home School campus in Poly to downtown Fort Worth and back, just to go down there and see what's going on. It took all day to get there, but we did.
Yeah, that's quite a trek.
Anyway.
That's interesting. Yeah, I didn't even think about that, because, in my high school career, come Friday night, me and the guys were driving to somebody's house and trying to do something to act like we were cool, and that it's interesting. But of course, that's different time too. Like you said, it was still kosher to get out there and hitchhike and get a ride. And
well, also, this guy was really fortunate. He'd find him a city girl to date, and she had a car.
Yes.
There you go. Playing the game at the next level.
That's right.
Interesting. Then he becomes Mr. Popular.
Right. And then everybody else wants him and his girlfriend to take them places.
Yeah. You've kind of mentioned, how powerful of an impact the home and school had on you. I mean, is there anything that kind of stands out that, you feel really blessed about the home and school?
Yes. And something that comes to mind, and you ask any home guy, home girl, any ex-student, and you say, what's this one thing that was just the most impressive thing about being there? And they would all say Christmas.
Oh, wow.
Here you have these 200 kids that have the only family they have or the family there. And so there was a special lodge that stepped up to the plate for Christmas. And that lodge is Oak Cliff Lodge number 705 out of Dallas. And what those guys did from way back in, I think, the 30s or 40s, they would get a list of the names of the children enrolled in Masonic Home and School all the way up to the last day, because you never knew when the new kid showed up.
Yeah.
And they'd get these lists of kids, and they would disperse these names out to the lodge members, and they would go and buy gifts for, they'd get Paul Underwood's name. He's 12 years old, a boy, and they go buy something for a boy 12 years old and put Paul Underwood's name on it, and so forth. They went through and did that with the 200 some odd kids. And they did that every year that I was there, before and during and after. Oak Cliff Lodge came to the rescue. And here we are, we assembled in the high school auditorium. I'm just trying to give you a visual picture of how profound this was. But, and we used to go back after we graduated because we wanted to experience it again, watching. But you go into the high school auditorium and the curtain would be pulled shut, and they put the little kids in the very front and the high school kids in the back. And then for a little while, there would be Oak Cliff Lodge would put some entertainers over there to entertain us a little bit, singing Christmas carols and that kind of stuff, and had guys that dressed up as clowns but then they would they'd open the curtains, and these presents would be piled I'm going to say 6 foot high, from one wall to the other side of the wall, from the front of the stage to the back of the stage. There were hundreds of presents there. You've got, just visually think about it, there's 200 kids there, and we all got 3 or 4 presents. So there was 800 gifts there,
Wow.
all wrapped. And so whenever the curtains pulled back, just everybody just started cheering, because trying to figure out whose is going to be what. And so then the high school students were the ones that got up there and distributed those gifts. And of course, they knew where Billy sat and where Rhit sat and so forth, and Gabe. That's where they knew where they were at. So they found their presents and they'd take them. And so it was like, but of course, you weren't allowed to open them there, because then it would be too big of a mess. So you're able to just collect these wrapped gifts, and you could shake it. You could get away with shaking it and see if you could figure out what was in there. But you'd collect your gifts, and then after they were all distributed, we'd carry them back to our rooms or our. And of course, the discipline was that before breakfast the next morning, you had a letter written to the people that gave you that gift, thanking them.
Oh, wow.
Because they put their name and address in there inside the gift, and we were always just enormously grateful for that. And so that was the highlight of each year. We called it Oak Cliff Tree, because Oak Cliff Lodge, they just came to the rescue. But other lodges likewise did similar things. There was High Noon in Dallas would come over each year and take all the kids. They'd charter buses and come over there and take us to the state fair. And that was a treat every year. And they gave us passes, and it was Masonic Home and School Day in the Midway, and they all let us in with ribbons on and got to ride all the rides for free.
Oh, fun.
And so just, and I can't remember all of them, but there was another lodge, it could have been a Fort Worth lodge, but that took us to Six Flags when the Red opened. Yeah. We got to go there. And then other lodges from West Texas that come and get the high school boys and take us to the hill country to go deer hunting. And they'd have different Masons down there that showed us how to use the guns and so forth, and would take us out, coach us on a deer hunt. And then we'd also take trips around the state and visit and go into different cities and live with Masons for the weekend and experience the different parts of the state by having trips that were sponsored by lodges in different districts of the state. And that was a treat as well. We went to Casa Mañana, Lake Whitney, senior trips, and another thing that was really special and unique there about high school graduation is that the home school gave you at high school graduation a set of Samsonite luggage for a graduation present, because that night you were going to use it. Because in all sincerity, after graduation, you are no longer welcome to spend the night there.
Yeah.
Oh,
you
wow.
spent graduation night somewhere else for the rest of your life.
Wow. So that had to be a surreal moment as that came up, as that started getting closer.
You knew it was coming. It wasn't like a surprise.
That's a really rapid
there was
transition,
no flexibility on it. You come back and visit anytime you want to, but you're not spending the night again.
So that's really interesting, though, about how, not only was the home and school supported financially by lodges under the Grand Lodge of Texas, but it sounds like a lot of lodges went out of their way to provide some sort of, to provide experiences and mentorship, that it really was a statewide initiative.
Absolutely. And, you may have seen it on the list of Grand Lodge committees. There is a Grand Lodge committee called the Masonic Graduates Advisory Committee. I've had actually the honor of chairing that committee in my tenure in Masonry. And And of course, with the home closure, what that committee was set up for was to provide parental guidance, if you will, advice and advice on how to make it into the public society, whether you're going to go to college, give you advice and help with that, or to help you get a job somewhere if you're not someone that were academically inclined to go to college. There was a man there in Fort Worth. His name was C.J. Davidson. He was an oil man that owned Davidson Oil Company, and my high school principal sent me down to visit with him, and he said he would pay for my tuition and books and room and board to go to college, and as long as I made good grades. And he did that, and it helped me immensely to get through college.
Wow.
But back to that committee, though, today it's the committee still exists, and I have a proposal that tried to get it passed back about 10 years ago, and it didn't make it to the floor. But I'm going to talk to the Grand Master next year and see if we can't get this resolution on the floor. And what I want this committee to be recharged with, we either need to recharge it with something meaningful to do, or we need to dispose of it, because the purpose in which it was created no longer exists. But here's, I think, an honorable charge for that committee today is I think the Grand West has not a legal obligation or a financial obligation, but we have a moral and fraternal obligation to care how our former students are doing in the world. And this committee can stay in touch with the Ex-Students Association and report back to the Grand West, sort of a census type of report, by going to these reunions and seeing how they're doing. And I just think that that's something that we have a moral obligation to care how they're doing.
Yeah.
And to share that with our membership. And I sort of tried to do that individually by having a few speakers at Grand Lodge over the past 2 years share their life stories. And,
Yeah.
and I hope we can continue that. I hope the Grand West doesn't get tired of hearing that, because it's a testament to the still lasting legacy of what our fraternity has done for society. And these people are there to give credit where credit is due for the blessings that the fraternity gave them when they were a young person.
Yeah, I know me personally, you'd have to be pretty cold-hearted not to enjoy those talks, because I think we've heard 4 different stories, and each one of them has given me goosebumps. I mean, it really should remind Masons what we can do if we come together as a unit, because that home and school wasn't government funded. It wasn't, it was completely built and done by Masons of Texas, and we just decided to do it. And we can do things like that again, not necessarily in the same fashion, but in the same grandiose scale as that, because that changed a lot of lives.
And there's been, and I don't lose sight of this. This is personally important to me, that there's been 3 former students that have been Grand Master before me. And if tradition prevails, I will be the 4th. But those 3 guys, Hugh Craig, who was from Fort Worth area, his picture hangs in the wall there in the temple, as well as Johnny Bean out of El Paso, in the 19. Hugh Craig was Grand Master, I believe, in 1944, something like that, and Johnny Bean was Grand Master out of El Paso in 1960, I believe, and then Tom Land again out of Fort Worth area was Grand Master in about 82 or 84, something like that. And I had the honor of knowing all of those guys. They all had the same burning passion and commitment to get involved in masonry for lack reasons, I believe, to want to do what they could with their time and talents to, in some small way, repay this incredible fraternity for what was given them opportunity-wise. And they've said, and I say again, that it's a privilege to be able to say that we all four have been raised by masonry twice.
That is what's so unique about it. I mean, because there's something that's just so pure about knowing that you have experienced masonry indirectly, since day one for you, being raised there. And the motivation that has to come out of that has to just be, so pure and unique that
it's not that other people like all three of y'all don't have incredibly profound reasons for joining masonry, but it's just a somewhat, not that I don't share those same sentiments that many of y'all have, but this is just an additional profound reason that it's something you just have to do it because you want to do it. You know that this is something your maker wants you to do because you've been raised to be grateful for what has come your way, and now's your chance.
Yeah, it's almost like a clear calling.
Yeah.
And I have somewhat of a similar story with my grandfather because he had polio and the doctor said he's done. Your child's not going to survive, and they took him to the Scottish Rite Hospital. And long story short, here I am. So he became a Mason. Kind of the same reason because he knew that they were connected and that it saved his life, and so he was grateful.
Right, Worshipful, if you don't mind me moving into a little bit more about the fraternity itself.
Yes.
One question that we wanted to know was, what lodge did you join? We heard about your inspiration and how old you were, but why did you pick the lodge you did when you decided to petition?
Well, I was, of course, like I told you, I had a 3-year wait in the ante room till I turned 21. But
love that.
During that 3 years, I worked for a couple of different establishments. They were gas stations back when they were full service gas stations. I worked at a gas station in Corpus Christi when I was going to Texas A&I University, and then later on when I was going to University of North Texas, I was living in Mesquite and worked for a gas station owner there in Mesquite. Both of those gas station owners, I didn't know it, but when I turned in my employment application and they saw that my application said graduate Masonic Home School, they both said, you're hired, that you are here to help me satisfy part of my obligation.
Wow.
And they were both they were incredible Masons, but but the one that was there in Mesquite that I worked for, he was a member of Mesquite Lodge 928. So where you figure I'm going to join and working for him when I turned 21, I'm going to Mesquite 928.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why and where I turned in my petition while I was still in college. Some people here today, they don't have time to learn to work or whatever. And It was a little challenging doing it full-time student and full-time working, but I had the passion to do it, and it did. But that's the lodge, and that's why.
Mhm. Okay. Which, on a side note, that is quite a commute from Mesquite to the University of North Texas.
I did. And I did that for 4 years.
It's a good point, Billy.
And right, it was. It was a long commute. I never spent the night in Denton, Texas.
It's funny.
So, if you don't mind me asking, what was your lodge like when you joined?
Well, one of the things I remember is it was a smoking lodge. But no, it was a very active lodge. There were all a diverse group age-wise. But being a student and working full-time, I didn't stay as active as I would have liked to have, and I sort of I never ceased paying my dues, but I slipped out of masonry for a while to finish my education, and I did serve as master of ceremonies in Mesquite Lodge, but shortly after finishing up school there, I relocated to the Hill Country and moved my membership to Johnson City 561, and that's where my home lodge has been ever since then. But as far as Mesquite Lodge, I have a lot of good memories there, and I run into brethren from Mesquite Lodge periodically when I'm in the DFW area that were members there when I was there, and rekindle old friendships.
Oh, wow.
But, it's like I said, I moved my membership to Johnson City in about 94, I think it was.
Okay. So, in your Masonic career, what offices have you held at the lodge level?
Well, like I said, in Mesquite Lodge, I held a position of Master of Ceremonies. Then in Johnson City Lodge, I held a position of Junior Deacon, Junior Warden, Senior Warden, Master Secretary, served Secretary. I've since, like I said earlier, I'm a member currently of, I believe it's 11 lodges, and I've served as Secretary of Johnson City Lodge, as well as Oslo Naval Lodge here in Corpus Christi. And I've served as treasurer of Sunset Lodge. But so I've held quite a few positions throughout the Blue Lodge over the course of my, 46 years as a Mason.
Okay. So, what are your favorite aspects of Freemasonry, and why?
Well, and that's a personal question that we all would give maybe a different answer. My answer is my favorite aspect of Masonry is the fellowship and the benevolence. Obviously, for benevolence, for obvious reasons, that it is what has inspired me to be as active as I have been in Masonry. But the fellowship and the benevolence, meeting and getting to know good men from all walks of life is a never-ending journey in self-improvement. In other words, that you're always learning from people that you meet, or maybe times as well they're learning from you. But it's shared knowledge and that fellowship. It's just something that it's a never-ending cycle of self-improvement. And of course, the benevolence is really the cornerstone of why I'm a Mason today, being a part of an organization committed to, as we say, leaving the world a little bit better than we found it. It's very inspirational to me.
Right. And it seems to me like something that, especially in these days, we need more of.
It is. There was a survey that was done by the Northern Jurisdiction of Scottish Rite a year or two ago. They surveyed a nationwide survey of prospective men, not prospective practitioners, but just people that weren't Masons that might be interested. And the results of that survey said that 72% of the men they surveyed would be interested in joining an organization that offered them fellowship and benevolence. That were the two things that was of profound interest in these people that were being surveyed about organizations. What would be cause them to be interested in? That was the two things: benevolence and fellowship.
Wow. And here we are waiting for them, right?
Right.
Yeah. And I think really and truly the benevolence that a lot of those guys are looking for is like what you mentioned earlier that these lodges would do with the home and schools. Because I think about teaching a young man how to deer hunt, what a life lesson that you're going to cherish that memory as a man. And that kid's going to cherish it as well. Well, we can all write a check today to any charity, and that is noble, don't get me wrong, but Masonry gives you an opportunity to be a little more hands-on and effective with a group of solid men. It's like an army of good men wanting to do good.
Exactly.
And I definitely think that's a big draw.
So, Right Worshipful, what do you see as the strengths and weaknesses of Texas Masonry as it is today?
Well, sometimes a strength is also a weakness, but I believe that one of the strengths of our fraternity in Texas is its rich history, beginning with the Republic of Texas forward. That everything from creating the public school system in Texas to just being an integral part of winning Texas's freedom. And then our diversity, that we are not a bunch of old or white men. We're both young and old. We're of all colors and nationalities. We have grown to be a very diverse fraternity within Texas, with a passion to help the less fortunate brethren. And our commitment still to public education. We take time to read, and that I think that we should not, and I don't want to see us lose sight of our rich legacy. But then also we need to be, I guess, committed to creating our own legacy. What are we going to leave this world when we're gone? We can't rest on the accomplishments of our predecessors. But as far as the weakness of our fraternity, I think it's collective inaction. That, as with most organizations, we look to someone else to step up and do what we're all capable of doing. We have to be, as a group, we have to become engaged in solving our own issues. And I've seen more people becoming engaged to tackle our issues, and I think that, so that's where I said earlier that weakness can be a strength can be a weakness. That even though I think that it's in action, I believe I see that trend, that tide turning. And so, but it's collective inaction. I think is our biggest action, our biggest weakness. That we all want something to happen. It's just nobody's stepping forward. Collectively, and we need that. And I believe that people are looking for, the fraternity is looking for a sound message that's it. Let's do that. And Rhit, you've been on the planning team for 2020. You have to create excitement.
Yeah.
You create excitement in our fraternity, excitement about the prospect of turning us around, so to speak. And I don't mean that negatively, but that where you have an army of good men
Yeah.
that are just waiting for the call to action. And I believe we will do it.
Yeah.
So
Once they get set to work, I mean, what's going to happen, you know? Because I like the way that you put it, right, Worshipful, when you said, you know, what are future generations going to look back on our generations and think, you know, look what they did. Because just like we revere the Masons of past that built the home and school, the Grand Lodge, you know, our Masonic temple there in Fort Worth, they they put the rubber to the road and made things happen. And they have a real legacy for us to be proud of. And we've got that same responsibility.
And my brothers, I've always approached not just masonry, but life is always the glass is half full, or in this case, even more than half full. I'm optimistic, and I believe our fraternity is not only going to survive, I believe we're going to see an uptick in our relevance. I think that our fraternity, not by design, but just by our inattentiveness, we've disappeared in front of society. Society doesn't know we exist anymore collectively.
Yeah.
Or they don't know what we do. So that's what. Not that they might not know there's some buildings around and they don't know what's going on there, but as far as what we represent and our image, it's a blank slate.
Yeah.
We must. It's going to scare some people to hear this, but we must market ourselves. Public awareness. We've got to take our story to the non-Mason. If we tell our story in an effective way, a comprehensive way of telling our story, not just of our past, but how we're relevant today, which we are, and answer their questions, the good men of our society will come our way. And we need to take that message to the women as well as the men. We need to quit preaching to ourselves and go reach out to these groups and take a chance on getting turned away. But we've got to provide the knowledge to society of, in fact, we are relevant today. The values and principles that we represent are still good as today as they were 100 years ago.
Yeah, and that's the thing. In today's society, you can quickly get lost in the shuffle. So, you know, while that marketing word can raise some people's ears a little bit, if we don't get caught up with the times and at least express our story, because what we're doing now is very relevant. You know, with all the lodges we have in Texas, they contribute a huge amount to our society. And there's no reason why we can't get out and let that message go.
So, right, Worshipful, if you don't mind, as a follow up to that, where you mentioned we have this inertia and we need to break out, and there are some, you know, wonderful people that are working toward that. I know I personally, and I'm sure, you know, the rest of the brothers on this podcast get approached by brothers who have ideas, but they feel like they either don't have the authority to take action on them, or they feel like, or they get challenged, right, and then they stop. They'll mention it to someone and they'll get challenged with, well, what Grand Lodge committee authorized that? Do you have any comments, any words of inspiration for those brothers who do have that?
I would say do it. I believe that the goodness of someone's intentions allows for forgiveness for some misstep that broke some rule or whatever, but that the end result is you're wanting to take some action that is to move us into the next phase of the growth of masonry. And we've always had some bluebirds in our fraternity, and they will always be around. But I say to those people, don't let the bluebirds control you. Just turn a deaf ear to their criticism and do the right thing for masonry. And I believe that we'll all be better off by us all taking that type of action as opposed to letting the negativity where it might creep in to manifest itself. Just refuse to let it happen.
I mean, that's a good point. Somebody's got to start a snowball to get rolling, right? There's got to be some kind of action taking place.
Mm-hmm. I'd offer as well that, we really do. A lady told me was about to go on a television show in Corpus for promoting the circus. She was asking me, what are you doing here? And so I'm here to talk about the circus coming to town. And so, what are you here for? She says, I'm here to create excitement. And I thought, wow, tell me some more. She said, young man, she says, nothing in this world ever happens until people get excited. So I'm here to create excitement. And I thought, man, at first I thought some sort of silly things about what she meant, but then I thought about it some more. I thought, well, that's a pretty profound statement. Whether it's war, whether it's elections, whether it's anything, nothing happens until people get excited, either positively or negatively. So we've got to create excitement in our fraternity before anything's going to happen. How many non-Masons know you and I are a Mason? Many of us, what we do, we put on our caps and our lapel pins and belts and ties and so forth, and we go to lodge. And I don't mean this sarcastically at all, we're proud to show that around our lodge and so forth. But then we go home, we take it all off, put it on the dresser, and we don't put it on again until next time we go to lodge.
Yeah.
We don't display our membership proudly to the non-Mason, and we should. And some people don't do that because they're afraid of being criticized or have to pass the test of what are you devil worshipers about, or your Illuminati guys. We need to have the courage to stand up to that, not to get into an argument, but to basically give testimony to what we are. Rebecca and I have Masonic license plates on our cars. That provides a little money towards the Grand Lodge funding, but it does a couple of other things as well. It promotes Masonry. Every person that sees our vehicles, parked or driving, it's marketing our fraternity. Now, it's marketing it badly if I don't drive well.
Good point.
That in itself is a good thing because it causes us to drive more courteously.
Yeah.
And people say, I don't want to wear those things because then I like to drive like a bat out of hell. And so I'm going to, I won't do that. Well, I would ask you to then maybe reconsider your decision. I think that we've all got to play a part in marking our fraternity by our behavior. But the people see you as a good man, they need to also connect the dot between your goodness and Masonry. They know Rhit Moore is a good man, but they don't know he's a Mason. It's a lost opportunity.
Yeah, it's a good point. And part of being a better man is being a better driver, right?
That's right. That's right.
That's
what I tell my wife.
I also think that one of the major disservices we do to ourselves is that when people ask us, "Hey, like, what do Masons do?" Often we say, "Oh, well, we're a fraternity and we do fraternity initiations every once in a while, and mostly we just get together and we, handle the business of the lodge, and we develop a fundraiser and pick what charity we're going to donate to, and we just there's many ways of doing it, but often what I find, and I've found myself doing this as well from time to time, is just downplaying what the fraternity is. And it's a major disservice. And what you talk about with being excited and getting people excited is a valuable concept, because if people don't think that this is the best thing you can do with your time, they're not going to be interested. That's kind of pretty much it, you know?
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
And I ask people when we go to lodge, I say, well, you know, at the end of this lodge meeting, ask yourself, what in this lodge meeting is going to cause you to want to come back next week? And what's going to, in this lodge meeting that happened today, what's going to cause you to pick up the phone and call Gabe or Rhit or Billy and say, man, you really missed a really incredible meeting last night because of X, Y, and Z. How many times can we say that? And many times we can't. And
Right.
we need to take that challenge and get excited about how can we create excitement in our lodge meetings, because that's going to attract people. It's going to keep the people we have. It's going to attract new people, because now everybody's going to lodge. Where are you going? I'm going to lodge. What's that all about? They start asking you questions. But if you're going to a lodge meeting and it's just the same old, I'm not saying that's the case in your lodge, but in many of the lodges that I attend, it is.
Mm-hmm.
We need to create some excitement there as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point, because when I leave a good lodge meeting and I'm excited, my wife can tell, you know, she's like, oh, it was a good meeting tonight, you know. So that energy is kind of has an effect on us, you know, to where it's going to bleed off into everybody that I meet. So when I say I'm going to lodge, it's going to be with a different tone and frame of mind.
It's contagious.
Yes.
Right, Worshipful, you mentioned the need for us to market ourselves a little bit better, both as individuals and as lodges. Are there any other key areas of focus that you think we should work on to help us improve?
Well, that marketing, as well as I think family. You know, there's some, I guess you'd say, platforms for 2020, and they're really platforms that should be a part of Masonry today. That being marketing, but our legacy that again focus on what are we going to leave behind that we played a part in. Focus and think about that, and if the interest, I can't think of anything, well, we need to start readjusting what we're working on, where we can be a part of making our world a little bit better. Mm-hmm. But then the other part of it is family, not just our home family, which we talked about that earlier, but our appendant body family. You know, these challenges that we face in Blue Lodge are the same challenges that are faced by all the appendant bodies. They don't get a single new member until we do, at least as far as new prospect.
Yeah.
And that we shouldn't be trying to solve these issues independent of each other. We should be working together to solve them collectively. And I've reached out to the other appendant bodies. In fact, there's a member of all the appendant bodies on the planning committee where they are integrated with this, and their input is solicited. And we are approaching these issues together as a fraternal family. But I don't know if that's answered your question, what you were looking for. But the marketing part is not just telling our story. To me, it touches so many different parts of what we're doing today. We must do a much more robust job of celebrating our historical observances that I don't know how many of those you guys have been to, because most of them are down in Houston, Corpus area from the battles with Mexico and so forth. Mm-hmm. But if you've been to many of those, they aren't as robust, and there's no excitement there. And I don't mean it's a celebration necessarily, but that sometimes it's a somber occasion like the Alamo, but that still with that reverence, we should be excited about honoring the contributions these men made to the creation of our country, really, before it became a state, and that we get more excited about doing that, and that our membership is excited to attend, and then we reach out to the public to invite them, that we aggressively seek out attention, not for our fraternity per se, but the attention that we're out there to help celebrate these profound accomplishments in the history of the state of Texas, the country of Texas, and that Masonry played a part in that. We should be wanting to scream to the heavens about that, and we just need to do that more profoundly. That's part of the marketing. Is likewise our cornerstones. We leave cornerstones are all over the state, and when we do another one, that's another long-term footprint we've left. And if all we're doing is going out there and doing a cornerstone installation, and there's 10 Masons there standing in the crowd, once again, we're preaching to the choir. We need to solicit participation by the community, at least to let the community know that we're doing these things, and incorporate that into the program as well.
Right.
I think we can do a much better job of that, and we need to also seek out and not wait for people to come to us asking, hey, y'all want to do a cornerstone here? We need to be going to them, seeing where there's bond elections going on for schools and fire departments and so forth, that we're going to them saying, hey, you've got this development coming up in the next year or two. We would like for you to consider us doing a cornerstone there, that we're on the offensive, if you will, for cornerstone opportunities and not waiting for the phone to ring.
Right. Yeah. And those are fantastic ceremonies. My son and I went to the cornerstone laying at the TMRC for the new building that they're having there. And my son came away excited because he put in the, this being the centennial year for DMLA, he put in his centennial lapel pin in there. And he was stoked about the thought that, that's going into a time capsule that years down the road, someone is going to open up that time capsule and they're going to find his lapel pin and know something about what he was about.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of that time capsule, it's something that at the time I just didn't pursue opening it, but those cornerstones that are in the basement of the Masonic Temple, one of those cornerstones had a time capsule in it, and that time capsule still is unopened in the possession of the organization Masonic Home School over in Hearst. And they asked me when we wanted to open it, and I said, well, let me get back with you on that one. That needs to be done at some public event near or on the Homeland School campus, the former Homeland School campus. But that time capsule there is, I don't know the exact date on it, but it's one like you said, the deposits were made there at TMRC. Well, this one's time to open it up and see what's in there.
Yeah.
And I think that'd be a pretty cool thing to do.
Oh, yeah.
Well, those are always fun.
Yeah, I'm getting excited just thinking about it. We need to make it happen.
Yeah. So, right, Worshipful, let's bump into appendant bodies.
Okay.
What all bodies are you a member of?
All of them.
That's what I was going to say. Which ones are you not a member of?
In no particular order, I'm a member of Scottish Rite in San Antonio. I'm a member of the Shrine Appendant Body out of Corpus Christi. Corpus Christi York Rite Chapter and Council and Commandery, Eastern Star, Allied Masonic Degrees, the And I can't name all the other ones that of other appendant bodies, but those are the primary ones that I'm a member of.
Yeah. And I'm certainly not going to ask you which one your favorite is, but I know, knowing you, that you do have a love for the shrine. And I wanted to ask you, what's your favorite aspect of Shrinedom?
Well, if I might add, what caused me to join the shrine really was the closure of the home and school. That after the closure, I was looking for something that was involved with helping children, and someone said, "Well, why don't you get involved in the shrine?" And so I did. But their mantra is, if you're familiar with it, is having fun helping kids.
Yeah.
Fellowship and benevolence, they sort of go hand in hand together, and Shrine stays true to that, and they do it very well. They also market themselves pretty well.
Yeah.
Their cornerstones are part of what make our extended fraternity appealing to me. And I think they do it all in a respectful way. But not all appendant bodies are of interest to everyone, and that's what makes us all different. But I've enjoyed my time with the shrine, and as well as the other appendant bodies as well.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you before we move on into the next subject, when it comes to, balancing that time in between Blue Lodge and appendant bodies, do you have any tips for the Mason that kind of struggles with that?
Well, I believe that where there's someone will say you shouldn't do that because that takes time away from the Blue Lodge for you to do appendant body X, Y, or Z. Mm-hmm. And, for the most part, they don't meet on the same nights. And if you are committed to these appendant bodies as well as your Blue Lodge, I guess I find the time to do it all myself, do it all. That if you truly are attracted to some aspect of one or more appendant body, I don't think your Blue Lodge work will suffer from that. Heaven knows your Blue Lodge might want you to do more and more and more, but you got to find a balance between taking care of your obligation to Blue Lodge, and I've stayed true to that over the 40 some odd years of being a Master Mason, but I've also found time to get involved with the benevolent parts of our appendant bodies. And I think that's what actually inspires me to be proud to be a Mason is the diversity that's offered by the different appendant bodies, that there's something in there for all of us. Maybe not every appendant body has something of interest to us, but that one or more of them does. And that's what enriches our journey through Blue Lodge.
Yeah. I mean, because bottom line, it is our journey. So if you find one you like, like you said, find one that doesn't meet on the same night as your lodge and just learn the balance. Talk with your wife. Figure that out.
So, Paul, I wanted to ask, moving to a different sort of subject, what and when was it that kicked off the thought process of you deciding that you wanted to make yourself available for the Grand Lodge line?
Well, I guess Masonry teaches us humility, and I try to practice that throughout my life. But I probably started thinking about it about 15 years ago, and I felt like that as I got older, that and my children had grown up and gone away, that I was looking for more of a challenge, if you will. that, some people run from problems, and some people run towards them. And the fear of failure is what makes a challenge important to me. That if you can accomplish it with no effort whatsoever, it's not really much worth trying to do, because anybody can do it. But in all humility, I thought that I had some skills and talents that would add value to the Grand Lodge trustee line with my educational background in accounting and IT, and my experience of managing, 1,200 people in the controller's office for 34 years, and that the leadership experience that I had, coupled with my financial background, I thought gave me the skill sets that would be of use to the Grand Lodge. And then also just I guess the desire to want to step into that arena and see if I had the vision and communication skills to be able to share that with enough people that agreed with me, that would tend to support my election.
What would you say is the process, and what do you have to do to prepare to become an elected grand officer?
Well, if there were a roadmap, I guess it'd be printed and everyone would do it. But, being a businessman again and looking at a challenge and saying, well, how are you going to skin this cat? Work out a game plan of how you're going to minimize failure at this. And, of course, you have to have accomplishments meaning that you have served in various capacities within Grand Lodge. You've proven your commitment not only by being a Mason for a long time, but you've been active and you've been in various leadership roles. And you've got to, you can't just wake up one day and say, I'm going to announce I'm going to make myself available for Grand South. You have to establish your credibility, and you establish it over years of time. And, I was elected to the Masonic Home School board of directors back, 8 years ago. And that was obviously a profound accomplishment for me to be able to serve on the board, even though it was closed. It was still serving on the board of the very organization that oversaw my upbringing. So that was very, very rewarding to serve in that capacity. And I served as treasurer there and helped grow that endowment from when the closure, the endowment was around $54 million to today it's approximating $100 million. And
Yeah.
And there's other people on that board that played an important role as well. But to be able to say that I helped contribute to that is satisfying as well. But those kind of accomplishments, along with, you have to create a network of people around the state that know you, that you can't rest on the printed material that comes out in the statement of availability. They go, who in the heck is this guy? But when you start traveling around the state over many years of meeting people and getting to know them and them getting to know you, that you're known around the state, you have to work a long time at that to create that network. And that's just a group of people that you have common interests with, that have the similar values with you, and they think that they believe that you might be the guy, and will help you as far as letting you know when something's going on in that area that you need to come and be a part of. But that network, that creating your credibility. And then you have to have not just a message, but a vision of what you think our fraternity, how it can grow and prosper. And you have to be able to deliver that. And then, of course, you have to prove your commitment. You can say it all day long, but until you prove your commitment, it's just a bunch of words.
Yeah.
And you prove that commitment by traveling. And you do that traveling, and you get done doing that traveling, you do some more traveling. You've got to make yourself visible all over the state, not from just a token shaking hands, but going and listening to people. You know, I learned as a young child that, you know, the good Lord gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth, and we need to use them in proportion.
Yeah.
And you do that, travel in the state, and you will have people telling you what you need to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. No, there's something about that because you kind of get a consensus of what's going on around the state.
A good leader is a good listener.
When you were traveling around the state, now that we're talking about listening and hearing things, what was the most consistent thing, whether it's a praise or complaint or just an observation? What was the most consistent statement that you heard when you were traveling around the state, and that as you are still traveling around the state?
Well, one of them was really a distrust for Grand Lodge. That there's a segment of our membership that thinks that the Grand Lodge is secretive and does things that without their permission, and I don't know why they think that, because they could never really give me specific examples. But you know, the trustees of the Grand Lodge of Texas each only have 1 vote. We are servants of the Grand West, and that if we're not serving the Grand West in the way that they collectively want us to, they are remiss if they don't replace us with somebody that will. That we should never, as a trustee, lose sight of the fact that we serve the Grand West. The Grand West does not serve us.
Yeah.
But I heard that, if you will, criticism, concern, whatever label you want to put on it, that of the Grand West not being, or the Grand Lodge trustees not being attentive to the needs of the lodges, and some of their needs are profound. Everything from, what are you going to do to fix membership? Well, you turn that around and say, what are we going to do to fix membership?
Exactly.
You know, 5 guys aren't going to have the answer. You might have some suggestions, but if we don't create excitement over those suggestions, they're going to go nowhere. So,
yeah, it kind of leads back to that inaction you talked about earlier. You know, we got to get busy collectively. Also,
on the positive side, I found so many people, and this is probably not probably, this trumps the Grand Lodge criticism, if you will, is that most and by far the people that I visited and talked to and listened to, they were just so very excited to have an opportunity to speak with me. And you know, I went to a lot of lodges that the common expression I heard is, no one ever came to our little lodge as a candidate for the South before. You're the first ever. And you know, I'd heard, when I was sort of gearing up to do this, I heard and I will not say who because it doesn't matter who, but I heard from several people that said, don't bother going to anything west of 35. That it doesn't matter. There's not enough votes there. But, I went to those little lodges and I said, little lodge in Johnson City, Texas, some people don't think you're important, but I think you are, because the people in Dallas Fort Worth are going to know that I was out here visiting you in Johnson City or Orlando or wherever it might be.
Yeah.
And that they're going to see that you do matter. And I believe you matter. And I think that probably that kind of attitude, I think, permeated across the state into letting the brethren know across the state that they all are important to the survival of our fraternity.
That's one of the things that I would say I've heard pretty consistently from brothers that I know and from listeners of the podcast that are located in what we would call country lodges. And, the consistent complaint is, hey, in the grand scale of things, I feel like I'm being left behind, or I feel like my opinion doesn't matter, or even I feel like nobody knows that we exist. And that's actually something verbatim that somebody told me about their lodge, which is located outside in the country. I feel like nobody knows that we exist. And he wasn't talking about his community, because his community knows that his lodge exists. He was talking about other Masons in the state. And it was a really kind of heartbreaking sort of sentiment here,
Yeah. It's the truth. We got to get to work together.
Right.
So,
Paul, I'm curious, when you were elected, the moment finally came and the results were revealed and you were announced the next Grand Junior Warden, what kind of thoughts were going through your head at that point?
Well, I don't think they captured it in a photograph, which would have been, probably as a guy, you say you don't want to cry, but I cried when I got elected. It just really touched me deep in my heart.
Yeah.
And it just standing there, what raced through my mind were the memories of my father, Masonic Home, my family, all of those flashed through my mind. It just was an incredibly humbling experience that I will forever remember and cherish. It just, all of those things raced through my mind and just, it was a life-changing experience.
Yeah, that definitely had to be, because you're getting the go ahead from the majority of the brothers in Texas to lead this fraternity. And something about Texas that we forget is that we are one of the biggest membership bodies in the United States. I think there's only 2 or 3 others that are ahead of us as far as total membership. So it's not a small gig.
Right. Exactly right. And it's complicated by a much larger geographic territory than those larger populated states. And I believe the two are Pennsylvania and Ohio are the 2 states that might have more Masons than we do, and possibly California, but we have a lot more geography to cover than them.
Yeah, that's the truth. So I know I was curious, and I'm sure the listeners are too, as far as, can you just give us an overview of what the trustees do? Which trustees are made up of the elected officers, right? The Grand Master, Deputy Grand Master, Senior and Junior Wardens, and Treasurer, Grand Treasurer, and Secretary, correct?
That's correct.
And so what's kind of an overview of what they do for the Grand Lodge of Texas?
Well, the Cliff Notes version is that we're charged with carrying out the laws and rules approved of each grand session. In other words, that we're the, if you will, the custodians of the laws that the Grand West legislates, that we see that are taken care of, and we provide the direction to help make those things happen that have been dictated to us as servants of the Grand West to carry out their wishes. Again, if we're doing our job as we should lead by example and be good listeners. Each year the Grand Master offers his vision on how the fraternity progresses to the next level. And, there's been some concern in the past about one Grand Master to the next does a 180 this way versus a 180 that way. And I believe that people, and I'm not dictating this by any means, but I believe people will attest to the fact that they're starting to see some consistency and direction in the past year or two of Grand Lodge, and I think you'll continue to see that going forward. That we're not doing breakneck turns from one year to the next. But if that Grand Master's message piques the interest and creates excitement in the fraternity, then that vision will become reality. And if it doesn't, it'll fall by the wayside until the next vision comes along. So therein lies I guess what we do is we're the custodian of the rules and the laws, and we have to administer those things, including the budget and so forth. But that really, that combined with providing food for thought on how we move forward, that again has to meet the approval of the Grand West, because we are the servants of the Grand West. That's how it is and how it always should be. We're servants of the membership.
Yeah, and I really feel like that we, that general consensus of that disconnect between, lodges and Grand Lodge, it's kind of a self-induced or self-created, because anytime I've ever had any kind of issue and had to contact a Grand Lodge committee or Grand Lodge officer, I've never had anything but a pleasant interaction. And you get that feeling that these guys are there to serve us as Masons, but you it's a two-way street. You got to reach out to them, and you'd be surprised at how willing they are to interact and, help you along.
I agree with that. It's, I think all of the other 5 trustees feel the same way.
So, right, Worshipful, if tradition prevails, you will be the Grand Master in 2020. How long have you been planning for your year in the Grandees, and what goes into planning that year as Grand Master?
We're going to be out of time before I cover all this, but I'm going to try to be brief. Of course, I started planning the year of 2020 right after the election in January of 17. And the membership was formed right away after that. Within 3 weeks, I had assembled a team of people to serve on that planning committee. And today that committee consists of 17 people that have different levels of participation, meaning that some are much more integrated into the process. Some of them are also more of an advisor role, like some of the appendant body people, but that 17 people have been at this since, I believe, Rhit, it was probably March of 17. We've been meeting quarterly together, and then within quarterly, we've been meeting online and through subgroups much more frequently than that. But some of the things we're working on, and some of it is you look back, we take the plans and what agenda happened with the predecessors, and you decide, well, how much of that, I don't mean necessarily decisions, but for example, your conferences, are you going to have the same number of 16, 17 Grand Master conferences around the state, or are you going to change it to 4? And there's pros and cons of doing that. And how many conferences you're going to have? What's the agenda going to be of that conference? You've got to pick, 150 district deputy grand masters for all the districts around the state. You've got to identify all of your appointed officers for the year 2020. You've got to create a plan for training the district deputies, and account for all the anniversary lodges. You've got to put this calendar together, and this 2020 calendar is, you end up seeing there's only 365 days in that, and they fill up pretty quickly. But again, the historical observances, the conferences, anniversary lodges, the Blue Lodge officer installations, some lodges you do official visits on. You've got a plan for the Grand Lodge installation of the officers, and in our case, 2021 or 2020 the installation, but 2021 Grand Session, leadership conferences, and it just goes on and on and on. I don't I won't try to enumerate all of them, but it's a very, very comprehensive year that I believe that, like, for example, this year, Grandmaster Stogner does not have a single weekend free until July. Every weekend is taken. And, when someone calls and asks you, can you come visit our lodge? Well, when do you want to come, or when do you want the installation, or whatever? And they will say, well, just any Saturday would do. And I said, well, no Saturday exists unless you want it in October. It's both, rewarding to have people want you to do things, and then it's also a challenge to try to be able to accommodate them, because again, we're a servant of the West, and we're going to do everything we can to accommodate all the requests.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and they
have
do.
To pick all the, like I said, DDGMs, DIs, committee members. You've got to design the Grand Lodge merchandise for all the different widgets and gadgets that are offered for sale, and try to figure out which ones are worth continuing and which ones aren't, and understand why they were or weren't, and maybe even consider new products to put out there. And I'm sure there's some things that we hadn't thought about planning for that we should have, and we'll find out maybe at showtime that we forgot to do something. And that's just the imperfections in planning such a complex year.
It's interesting. There's no doubt. I have seen your calendar for 2020, and it I don't know how you do it. It's very, very full.
Paul, as a Grand Lodge officer, what would you say are some of the most memorable moments that you can share?
I'd say, and there are memorable moments from me that also you guys would see them as well. And that's seeing the pride in the faces of the members and their family during the service awards that are done around the state. And sometimes I'm able to do those things. And it's just really heartwarming to see a man that's quarried or worked in the quarries of masonry for 50 or 60 years that's there to receive his reward. And if we do that in a honorable way and don't just read it out of a book, it really means a lot to them. And it's just moving to see these guys reach that milestone in their Masonic career, and just a sense of pride that they express. That's about as memorable as it gets for me.
Yeah.
Likewise, as well, some people are equally touched on being installed as Master of the Lodge or whatever, and I'm not discounting that, but that the service awards really sort of top the list. And then also, when they're done in a selective way, the medals that the Grand Masters give out to people, those things, again, if they're done in a respectful way, and I'm not saying they're not, but that how those things are delivered and what they're delivered for, it sort of validates that particular Masonic community that, yeah, well, John Doe, he sure deserves that, or he doesn't. And you can get yourself in trouble if you do that in a way that maybe doesn't meet with, I guess, the consensus of the area. But sometimes those are done because of what that person meant to you as Grand Master, and there's some justification in that. So those are memorable moments, both.
Yeah. Those service awards are touching. There's no doubt. Well, Gabe, do we want to touch on MasoniCon real quick before we get to the closing thoughts?
Yes, we do. Brethren, if you are interested in attending Texas MasoniCon 2019, that is our special educational event. We are going to have a bunch of speakers in the morning. In the afternoon, we will have a keynote speaker. We have not yet published who the keynote speaker is, but we've already booked him, and y'all are going to love this guy. The event is July 27th. We are currently running an early bird special with a limited number of tickets for $55. After that, it will go to the pre-purchase price of $65. So get your early bird special ticket while you can. It's going to be an amazing event.
Yep. And
last year was incredible.
Tickets at texasmasonicon.com.
Mm-hmm. So, gentlemen, I'm going to read our fraternal quote of the week, and then we'll go to closing thoughts. Rhit, Billy, myself, and then Paul. Our fraternal quote of the week is, "Men make history and not the other way around. In periods where there is no leadership, society stands still. Progress occurs when courageous, skillful leaders seize the opportunity to change things for the better." And that was by our illustrious brother Harry S. Truman, 33rd degree and past Grand Master of Masons in Missouri. Rhit, if you have any closing thoughts?
For sure. I've got 2 points I want to touch on. First of all, what an honor it is to have Paul on here, our Right Worshipful Deputy Grand Master. And I think it, all of us should kind of tip our hats to him coming on and talking with us about this show and kind of opening up what goes on back there, because there is no curtain between us and Grand Lodge. We just have to reach out. They're great Masons that just happen to have a different title than us. And for him to come on the show and share what his experience as a Grand Lodge officer, I can't thank you enough, Right Worshipful. But the main reason I wanted to have you on was for your story of your climb through Masonry. I mean, because it really touched me to hear your first new pair of shoes was when you got in the home and school at 10. And now you're looking at becoming the Grand Master of Masons in Texas. What an inspirational story of, rags to riches, if you will, for lack of a better term. I know you're not life of the rich and famous, but you are rich in a sense. I mean, because the fraternity has blessed you in such a way that I mean, through hard work, dedication, you've went from a child in the home and school to, fixing to be one of the highest titles can be bestowed as a Mason. And I think any Mason would be hard to find a more inspirational story, and we're lucky to have you. So thanks again for coming on the show, Right Worshipful.
You're most welcome.
I mean, Right Worshipful, as Rhit said, thank you for appearing on this show. I love talking to you and the other, brothers that we have serving at Grand Lodge. As Rhit said, it's amazing how approachable you guys are, and how, interactive you are with the brothers, right? It's not, I remember being a young Mason at 21, you would hear Grand Lodge officers and they seem almost mythical, right? Far away, you never expect to see them. But when you actually have the chance to interact with you brothers, I mean, I'm always humbled by how generous you are with your time and your advice. And for me, that's inspiring, right? And that leads me to want to, become a leader in my own right, and help out others in turn. Is that accessibility and generosity you have. So I want to thank you for that. And I find that it seems to be universal too. When I was traveling in Washington State, I picked up the phone, I called up the Grand Lodge, and in 2 minutes I was on the phone with the Grand Secretary of Washington. It's amazing how there seems to be a common theme there, that Grand officers are not these untouchable guys. You're very approachable, and I hope that that more brothers will take that to heart and approach you guys, because you have some amazing stories and advice to give out. And I also want to thank you for the encouragement you have, for brothers who want to try things, to give it a shot. Don't hold this incredible idea that you think you have down simply because there's a naysayer saying you need to have approval, or that you don't have the authority to do that. I think that's very encouraging, that there is a receptiveness to it. So thank you for that as well.
You're most welcome.
And Right Worshipful Brother Paul, I just wanted to say thanks for coming on the show. I really deeply admire your story of coming from the Masonic Home and School and where you are now. I think the message, whether it's the conscious focus or not, you're pushing a message of hard work and hope, and that's kind of a simple message, but hard work and hope is something that we can really build off of. And so thank you for everything you do, and thank you for dropping on in with us.
Honored to be here, my brothers.
Paul, if you'd like to say anything to close out, give you a little opportunity, then we'll finish this thing up.
Well, I don't want to go through and repeat all that I said before, but just sort of summarily, as I've said many times in the past, I became a Mason out of profound gratitude for the opportunities our fraternity afforded me in my early life. And I dedicate myself to doing all I can by contributing my time and talents to the betterment and preservation of this incredible fraternity that we have. And tonight, I appreciate the opportunity to visit with you tonight, and I hope I was successful in shining more light on the journey of one of your Grand Lodge trustees and what formative steps occurred early in my life that led me to this point. Thank you.
You bet. We enjoyed it for sure. Gabe, you got final notes, and
I
we'll
do.
sign off.
Brethren, if you would like to learn more about Fort Worth Lodge, you can find us at www.fortworth148.org. We are at Fort Worth Lodge 148 on Facebook. Our email is info148@fortworth148.org. If you live in the 64th District of the Grand Lodge of Texas and you want to promote an event, please reach out to them at 64th.org. That's 64th.org. If you want to learn more about MasoniCon or buy your early bird ticket, reach out to us at www.texasmasonicon.com. We spell that texasmasonicon.com. We are at Texas MasoniCon on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And as always, brethren, thank you for listening. We appreciate it.
All right, brothers, this is Rhit Moore signing off.
This is Billy Hamilton signing off.
This is Gabe Jagush signing off.
This is Paul Underwood signing off.